Hello and welcome to the next great debate. Today we have Linda Condon. I've known Linda for several years from the Amy committees, and of course my partner Jameed Billingsley. Linda is the Director of Clinical Services for Censis Technologies. Thank you for joining us, Linda.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So today's topic is, again, because it is so vital and so important, infection preventionist friend or foe in CS, SP, and the OR. So, Jameed, what's your take, friend or foe?
Well, I want to ask Linda. She has a wealth of experience on both the sterile
Yes.
processing and the operating room sides. She is known around the industry as an expert. So I want to ask you, Linda, has infection prevention been a friend or foe?
So I'm going to answer that. To me, there is no debate. Infection prevention is a friend. I have worked with them through my 35 years in the operating room and the sterile processing department. I have worked with them closely, and we have been able to accomplish a lot together.
That is wonderful. So, Linda, in our experience, because we're sent to hospitals or called in to partner, honored really, to partner with some hospitals in sterilization and in the operating room to audit their processes and kind of see what's going on or even educate. But infection preventionists, if I interview the central sterile staff, technicians, supervisors, and sometimes managers, I ask them, when was the last time the infection preventionist was in your department, called to your department, or around it, or part of even one of your huddles? They're so intricate in the development and prevention of cross contamination that they should join CS. And many times, they don't know their name. They don't even know where they live in the hospital. They've never met them. I mean, that's our experience.
I can't really say as far as being invited to the department. I will say that in my situation, infection prevention was invited to the department. And it was also established with our leadership team that we would round on a regular basis. Now, that wasn't in my 35 years, that's not always what the case was. So it took time to
That's
do
true.
that and make that happen. Infection prevention also had some things they needed to learn because
Mhm.
they aren't experts in the operating room and they're not experts in sterile processing. But having that infection prevention set of eyes on your operation, whether it be in sterile processing or in the operating room, is really key to help you identify and to continue to improve.
Mhm.
So having that relationship, I invited infection prevention, and we had a large group of practitioners, but there were certain ones that were assigned to certain areas, and invited them in and walked through the department, talked through our processes, showed them, and their eyes were like, bulging because wow, the sterilizer is so large, we never imagined, so it really was kind of creating that invitation to come in, let me show you, and then having to explain their questions, when they would see something and then you'd have to actually explain why. And then it also made you think, okay, well, how do I make this better? Because, she's right. She sees something that is, potentially an issue. So yeah, I think they're, learning the infection prevention side. We taught each other because we
Mhm.
both had expertise in different areas of, our career.
With Advantage, we developed a little, it's really like a 2.5 day class to
Hmm.
initiate an SME for sterilization from infection prevention. So to teach them the science of sterilization, the techniques, the idea was that they could open the door and peek their head in and say, what's wrong with this picture, right? Or
Right,
find Waldo kind of
right,
thing.
right.
And just to say, hey, they can help with the compliance of best practices or even some education even, and they're just phenomenal at doing that. And so to get them the information that they need. They just don't have enough information.
Right.
And so to get them the information they need, they are so important to see us and in the operating room. Many times the infection preventionist hasn't been in either. And so they're uncomfortable. You know, it's loud and noisy in there, and what's going on and what's the do's and don'ts and where do I stand and not. And they're
Young,
not
young,
from the
young.
OR or SP. So they, to get them acclimated to that and comfortable to easily walk into either is just so important. So good on you for doing that.
Yeah, so one of the other things that we worked as a team together with infection prevention was when we were preparing for Joint Commission, but it became not just the year prior to Joint Commission, it became an annual process
Wonderful.
where we walked through we identified every area in our institution that used instruments on patients. So whether that was a clinic or whether it was the cath lab, interventional radiology, OB, wherever. We as a team, spaced it out and throughout the year made certain that we made rounds together. Now, the rounding team was both regulatory infection prevention as well as sterile processing, so that we ultimately had the opportunity to look for areas for improvement, also to standardize the practices. So, we
Mhm.
already know that how instruments are used, the point of use care, how they're stored in the soiled utility room, how they're transported, then what you do in sterile processing. So we need to control that aspect of the process as well, because that can make you very vulnerable to a Joint Commission, inspection. So part of that was working in conjunction with infection prevention so that they could use the expertise of sterile processing, but also, I could learn from them as well, but to go through all of the areas. And that was just an invaluable experience because it also helped us to develop relationships with the other customers that sterile processing is servicing. And it also allowed us to, like I said, we can help provide better service to those departments if we also help them standardize what they need to do for us to do our job and how we can get it back to them. So it was really a two-way street, but then also was, providing standardization as well, which was very, very important.
And any reports, there's some compliance reports they can pull or the departments can pull from tracking systems that really help the IPs understand the compliance. So if the OR is scanning trays in the operating room before they send them down and, or different things like that, like tracking systems can really help get the data to help drive, the goal and key
Oh,
performance indicators for the IPs.
absolutely. I mean, having a tracking software that can pull the reports for you, that can indicate compliance. There were definitely occasions where I needed to back and, do recalls or even back into what instruments were used on a patient. So infection prevention was a real advocate and very, very helpful at creating that complete perioperative loop of the instrumentation, what an instrument goes through. So we were able to increase our scanning and get the OR scanning so that ultimately we could identify what sets were actually used in a room. The where it was, get the scan and the decontam so that that it went through the appropriate process. Into the washer, so you know what washer it was used in, assembly into the sterilizer. So tracking is critical. And with all the records, biologicals, obviously infection prevention is probably most focused on the biological reports and indicators, and most hospitals do have to report that information to their infection, prevention department at their, monthly meetings or whatever. It's very, very easy in a reporting or in a tracking software to get that information out very, very quickly. And to be able to see if you have any challenges with your documentation that you need to, overcome. And that is one of the things I will say that I do see is that in the electronic system, making certain that you are doing quality assurance with your system to make sure that your information is complete. You can't just assume that everyone is doing everything that they're supposed to. So you do have to have a quality assurance process to make certain that your documentation is complete.
So,
Absolutely.
So, and that is amazing, Linda, the things that you were able to accomplish, because getting the team
Mhm.
to scan into the operating room can be challenging. One of the things that I want to say here is I'm not going to pretend like it's a causation relationship, but it is a correlation. As Angie said, when we go into these, honored to go into these places that have opportunities for improvement, one of the things that we see as a correlation, not a causation, is a disconnect or not using infection prevention enough. And
Mhm.
sometimes in surgical services, we don't do a good job of understanding what everyone else does in the organization. And it's really an opportunity, like you said, Linda, to share. They have great relationships with the rest of the hospital. And in surgical services, sometimes we pretend like that doesn't have anything to do with us, but it does, because if things are trending in the rest of the healthcare world and the rest of the facility world, when the accreditation surveyors come there, you may only see them in surgical services, but they're also going to go somewhere else. So if there's things that are trending out there in that world, they can inform us as we teach them more about surgical services. So I agree totally with what you're saying. And it's really just leveraging, because one of the things that infection preventionists can help you with is objective views of the things that you're reporting. I always say, why doesn't infection prevention have a copy of your instrument tracking system on their computer? Because almost every instrument tracking system has unlimited licenses once you buy the system, right? It's not like you have to, hey, can I get another computer with infection with the instrument tracking system? Because let's be honest, because this is the great debates. Where are those aborted loads recorded? What about those biologicals that went positive that we had to run the load over again? How are those recorded? Because all the reports say zero biologicals positive, but in real operations, there's one or two times a month where there's a mistake made. And we pretend like that didn't happen. And I don't think we don't do anything nefarious, but those are the things that if you have infection prevention on your side, they can start asking some questions so we can get to a root cause of what happened. Because it may be a mistake and we might have caught it and it might not have affected a patient, but that's what we call in the infection prevention world a near miss. So in SPD, we just do near misses like, ooh, let's pretend like it didn't happen. And connecting with infection prevention can help us and it doesn't have to be in depth, but why did we have this aborted load? Why did we have this positive biological? So that's what I like about connecting infection prevention with the reports and all that stuff that come from instrument tracking systems.
I think the reports are very important regardless of whether infection prevention has the ability to pull them or whether they're reports that are automatically submitted to them or, monthly at some interval. But I think what I've seen is that some departments are afraid to talk about, much like you've said, they're afraid to talk
Mhm.
about those either near misses or the failures that they, or deviations, I call it, not necessarily failures. So, but to talk about those deviations is how you improve your practice, like you said, and determine what you can do to error proof it more or prevent it in the future. But you're going to have those events. Your sterilizer is going to abort occasionally, and you do need to make sure you know what your practice is associated with that. So I can't say that I needed infection control to, help walk through that. But I will say that I was not afraid to share with them when we had the failures, and I knew and could explain them, because then infection prevention can actually help be an advocate to get
That's
your
great.
equipment replaced. Or
Right.
maybe your preventive
Exactly.
maintenance contract is not up to par, whatever. There's different variables. So again, we're working together. It's a team. So I think I do sense that there are some departments that are afraid to report those failures. They're like, oh my gosh, I had a positive BI. I got to report that. But you know what? There shouldn't be dread. It should be, yeah, we had this and we caught it and this is what we did, and
Exactly.
express the competence of what happened and that you knew how to handle it. And then you're just gaining confidence or you're gaining respect on the infection prevention side, because again, they're here
That's
to
right.
help. Their goal is infection prevention. They want what's best for the patient, and we do too. So it really is a team effort.
I think that two of your points, right? One is it's not an exposure to the CS manager to show and report failures or deviations, right?
Right,
It's not exposure. And I think a lot of people are kind of CYA and cover, but to say it out loud, and it shouldn't be a fearful, that
right,
really defines the culture of the system or the hospital. And
right.
to have a culture that's open to say, hey, I need your help. We didn't do this or we couldn't do that. So, and really bring in the team and infection preventionists. And I think the other point you had was one of the things we said on the last debate, Jamid, was infection preventionists can be an advocate for CS in a way that helps you get the equipment you need, which you kind of stated a little bit, Linda. And I think even if you don't have a tracking system
Mhm.
or your hospital hasn't purchased one, they can help decide and be part of that committee to decide which tracking system is best for our system to reach the goals we're trying to reach. They can actually bring that to the CFO and the C-suite to help be an advocate for CS to get you the tracking system that you want or need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is probably a big goal of infection prevention because to be able to get information at hand and track where instruments are used and have the biological instrument information in an electronic system with all your records is very, very important in this day and age. So infection prevention could certainly be part of the team that helps, fight for that.
And, and one of the things that I always try to help people to embrace infection prevention is when we, no matter how important our equipment is in sterile processing or the OR, it's in a bucket of a lot of expensive equipment that was requested for that next year, right? So you
Yeah.
got the ice cream machines, the space suits, and all that stuff. And I joke about that, but if infection prevention brings an item up for purchase, it has such a big impact because they don't have any skin in the game as far as, well, we just like this, or they took us golfing, or they're sponsoring some of my research. Infection prevention says we need new washers. It really raises the possibility that we need it. And if infection prevention can help you get stuff like instrument tracking systems and things like that that can help you with patient care, because that's a patient care issue. Because the last three accreditations I went through, they all asked me, they just picked a random trait and they asked me to show them the last two patients that used it. Now, I know I look 23, but I've been doing this for a long time, and most of it was on the OR side. And I know how we, without an instrument tracking system, we save the stickers and the lot numbers. There's no way I could do that without having a electronic instrument tracking system. So, and it's not like I'm trying to be a sales rep or what have you. It's really a patient care thing as far as patient tracking, that everything has gone through the right process. And,
Right.
if you don't have instrument tracking, part of that reason might be your connection with your infection prevention, because doing that simple exercise in just in the week that they're there probably is not going to be achievable.
The other thing that we did together was we hosted several what we called lunch and learn, and we did this usually in preparation of a joint commission visit. But the point of it is that there was an opportunity to, because you're distributing sterile products throughout the hospital in the different areas, there was an opportunity to just briefly talk with the staff and, like I said, a half an hour lunch and learn to show them all the different indicators. How do you know this is sterile? How do you know it's been through a
Mhm.
process? When you open it up, what is the color of the indicator?
What a
Obviously it's
great
all different
idea.
if you're using ethylene oxide or if you're using Starad or Vpro or steam, et cetera. So there's different indicators depending on what vendor you use, et cetera, and what method. So there was an opportunity to go through that as well as just talk through general infection control practices as well as workflow and reinforce how do you pre-treat an instrument or point of use care after you use it? Where do you store it? Why do you need a biohazard container to transport, et cetera, et cetera? So we would host these together in preparation. So again, to just do widespread education throughout the hospital.
That's wonderful. That's a great idea. Lunch and
That is a
learn.
great idea.
I'm
I
taking
love
that.
that idea.
Can I borrow that?
Sure.
That's a great idea.